Greetings, Canadian investors. I trust you all had a great weekend. I know I did, as we here at the iWin Real Estate team hosted a sold-out iWin Mastermind tour in Hamilton this past weekend. I met some really nice people, including several listeners of the show. We met up for coffee and baked goods, and then we toured a fourplex conversion, which is special because it will likely be the very first of its kind in Hamilton, following the Bill 23 More Homes Built Faster Act that came out last year. We congregated in the living room while my associate Chris, the Captain Hook, walked us through the story of the property, how it was acquired, the numbers, the rental plans, budget, etc. As a real estate investor geek myself, I found the tour highly educational, as I hadn't been through this property before, nor had I seen the designer drawings, which were nicely provided in the handout. Printed in color as well. That wasn't all. The next house we toured was our bread and butter strategy of bungalows, except this one was special as it had a 2-car garage detached. And that garage had a nice concrete pad floor, and it was already roughed in for electricity, water, sewer, and natural gas. So this is not common at all. There's even already a working furnace in the garage, and what I found hilarious was that we had a group of 30 standing in this 2-car garage. It's roughly 600 square feet, and it's not the nicest thing. It's not the nicest place to hang out, but nonetheless, real estate investors, they love to network, and people were chatting it up as if we were at some sort of high-end event. But anyways. Yeah, for those who've been following along for a while, or our clients, or attending our events, both in person or virtual, that is what money looks like to a real estate investor. The opportunity for a detached garage that we can potentially convert into a garage suite, and then rent that out for somewhere over $2,000 a month. Next, we went for lunch. Many of you had questions about past episodes and guests, especially the more controversial ones, including what are the commonalities, red flags to watch out for. I've mentioned it before here, and I'll mention it again. Investors with multiple vacancies, meaning no rent is coming in, add to that a dash of aggressive investors who borrow at 8 to 12% interest rates. A lot of these folks are newer, the ones that do end up in ruin, so they don't understand that delays do happen in renovation and construction, especially major ones. There are contractors, there's a history of contractors who do disappear, or even worse, go bankrupt. And then when you have a project where you're completely over leveraged and you have multiple vacancies, you are destined for bankruptcy. I've heard it all over my career of being in full-time since 2010. And also, I have family in the trades. I had family in the renovation business. They're still alive. It's just my ex-family. Anyways, and they were in the renovation and trades business. We've had hundreds of clients execute 6-figure renovations. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot as well. My property's been over my history, over 40 properties. Several of those properties require 6-figure renovations as well, including a top-up. I've dug basements. I've used my own hands to remove plumbing stacks. Anyways, another tip is that I advise tour attendees to ask if someone's trying to sell you something. Sometimes if you're not even sure they're selling something, I think it's reasonable to ask. Ask them, how are they getting paid? I find me as Canadians, including people who interact with me, they're often just too shy to ask. For example, on occasion, and this is usually only by my clients, maybe 1 out of 10 times, on occasion, they asked if I'm being paid referral fees from home inspectors, designers, contractors, property managers, fence people, plumbers, whatever have you. The answer is no. And I've had offers. Many of them have offered me compensation as I'm basically doing their marketing for them. And so instead, I ask that my referrals, which are my clients, to these professionals, that they receive special treatment or reduced pricing. Special treatment could be just priority, please prioritize them over other people, right? Pardon me if I've said it before, but I jokingly refer to what we do as that we are in the business of manufacturing successful real estate investors. A successful real estate investor executes as smoothly as possible. They're generating cash flow, and then they'll buy more properties from me. They also refer their friends and family, knowing that this is the easiest way to build wealth. And then that's how we make money. Selling quality income properties is where the seller So remember, in real estate, in a traditional property that's being listed, the seller is paying the commission to the buyer agent, and that's typically how we make the majority of our money. And that pays for our time and effort and our coaching. So no need to hire a $10,000 to $30,000 coach out there or coaching program. We have all the experience we need here, and I'm not saying we're perfect, but we're always getting better. And we have all the power team connections any of our clients need to turn anyone into a millionaire real estate investor. We currently have over 45 of them, self-made real estate millionaire investors, and among our client roster, and we're always looking to grow that number. If you're interested in starting or improving on your investor journey, I'm hosting and delivering a free training event to answer the number one question I get. Erwin, what's the best investment? I'll cover mostly active investing, as that is the only way to become wealthy. Passive investing is more for the already wealthy and for registered funds, in my opinion. So I'll share what Jerry and I do for passive investments as well with our registered money. If you're on my email newsletter, then you're already looped in, along with the other 10,000 plus hardworking Canadians, on the latest news and the events around here at iWin Real Estate. If you're not, well, that's honestly just silly. Sign up today to receive timely updates on our new podcast episodes and be the first to know about our upcoming events. That's really important too, because our events have been selling out, especially our tours, because the numbers have a hard cap at 30. So yeah, like I said, you don't want to miss this. Our newsletter is the perfect way to stay connected with us and stay informed about all the exciting things we have in store. Don't miss out. Sign up now and join our community of 17 engaged and informed listeners. On to this week's show. We have Matt Biggley with us, who has done some very profitable investing in Windsor, Ontario. And he now has amassed a portfolio of 31 doors. Now, just to take a pause there, I know a lot of investors like to focus on doors, but I purposely mentioned that Matt is profitable. I think that being profitable or cash flowing or making money, that is a much more important metric than how many doors one has. The people who focus on doors, I don't know. It's just my opinion. Matt also owns some waterfront properties that he's doing some small development work on them, and including luxury short-term rentals within his portfolio. So key to Matt's journey is our successful partnerships. So we do spend some time on how he identified those strategic long-term partners. Matt describes himself as a lucky husband, a girl dad from a family of all boys, a reluctant investor who once had a chance to be on an HGTV show. He's a history teacher, once named the best teacher in Ontario, but he couldn't remember the names and dates. He's a top-based Windsor, Essex-based realtor who got his license as a side hustle, but he quickly became a top-earning agent and an experienced investor with Airbnb and, as I mentioned, 31 long-term rental units. He hates flips. We actually go through the episode why he hates flips, but he was still dumb enough to do them anyways. I've been there too. Despite telling his wife prior to getting married that he didn't like renovating, he once lived in six forever homes in 8 years, taking on massive renovations, which his wife Leslie documented on her way to amassing almost 60,000 Instagram followers and appearing on Better Homes and Gardens magazine. Also the Toronto Star and other top design sites. Matt is a big believer in the power of partnerships. As I mentioned, he would not have been able to scale to this portfolio without his partner, Kyle Pierce, and their company, North Shore Properties. In 2021, he was invited by Doris Lapico, a renowned realtor, Windsor realtor, to partner in the creation of the Real Group, and they are one of the top agents in the area. Matt loves to learn. If you can't tell, he's a former teacher. They have a podcast as well, and we go through all that in the show. Please enjoy the show. Hi, Matt. What's keeping you busy these days?
Erwin, I love that question. I actually just returned from my very first vacation in a number of years. It was a vacation for my family, but for me, I went with one of my best friends and my real estate investing partner, Kyle. And so it was the perfect mix. We got to talk business and investing the whole time, and the family got to have fun. First time on a cruise ship, and I can't help but wonder about the physics. It's so easy to tip a canoe, but how does a 19-story cruise ship float? I just don't get it.
Yeah. I have lots of questions about those things.
It was mind blowing. I've never even been next to one before. And I couldn't, the whole trip, I'm like, How are we floating right now? This is insane.
Yeah. And they have a crew of like almost 2,000 people.
That's right. Like
That's a lot of
6,000
people.
guests, 2,000 people. And Leslie, to be honest, after a while, you're like, I'm in a little bit of close quarters here, especially the day I got food poisoning. And I was just
Oh,
in the fetal position in our tiny little cabin. I felt bad for my family, to say the least.
you're a baller. Get a bigger unit.
It was our first time. It was our first time. The next time, the
Did you
next
at least
time.
get a balcony?
We did not. We did not. So that was maybe one of the
You are
lessons.
frugal.
That was
You
one of the
were
lessons.
saying frugal.
I'm calling you frugal. I actually think I'm maybe not on the Lambo end of but I like my nice stuff. I like my nice stuff.
Not a balcony, apparently.
Kyle planned the trip. Okay, I'll blame him. Kyle planned the trip. He's the frugal one.
What cruise ship are you on? Or should we
We
not?
were on. It was called the Carnival Celebration. I mean, this thing had a roller
Yeah.
coaster, basketball courts. Like it was wild. And these cruises, I think, are really about families and families having fun and feeling safe doing so. So that part
Mhm.
was amazing. My kids had the time of their life.
Amazing, amazing. And I'll just make the point that I'm a very pragmatic person because as we were talking before we were recording about being frugal. Like my decisions
You call it
are.
pragmatic. I call it frugal.
I think it's a little bit of both. Like for example, cruise lines have very high food and safety standards compared to a resort in say Mexico or anywhere in the Caribbean, right? So the incidences like you got, yeah, you got unlucky. But generally, my experience has been extremely good versus I always got travel sickness whenever I was in a Caribbean resort versus that pretty much never happened to me. And I've been cruising about 13 times, right? So
Wow.
again, it's a
Wow.
pragmatic
My food
decision.
poisoning came from some ceviche, questionable ceviche on a Dominican beach, not actually on the boat.
I never, again,
That
pragmatic.
was the
Oh,
fatal error.
you'll like this. Both pragmatic and frugal. I don't eat off the ship.
No,
I return to the ship to
where
eat
were
because I
you?
already
Where were
paid
you?
for it.
I needed that advice. I needed that advice about a week and a half ago.
Both for food safety, pragmatic, and for frugalness, I don't want to pay for food I've already paid for. So I go back to the ship and eat.
I love it. I love it. Good tip. I'm going to write that down on my list for sure.
And
For
get a
sure.
balcony.
Two big takeaways from today's podcast. Thanks for coming, everyone.
So Matt, I know you're big time into investing in Windsor, and your journey, your career journey is actually fascinating as well. Can you share with the folks what you used to do for a living before you got full time into real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. For 17 years, I was a full-time high school teacher, and don't get me wrong, I loved teaching. I still love teaching. I started off as a history teacher, and I was someone who was climbing that ladder, was really on track to become a principal. In fact, I did all of my principal qualification courses and got to the very last one, and I just had this like moment of pause where I was like, is this really and truly what I want to be doing, or is this what I'm supposed to be doing?
Mhm.
And I said to myself, there's so much more accountability and responsibility at that level, and I respect it. But I made actually a sharp left turn at that point and decided not to do that last course to get my principal qualifications. And instead, I ramped up my real estate investing. So that was one of those, TSN turning points in life for sure. I was passionate about teaching. I became a guidance counselor. In fact, in my early days of teaching, I won this award for being named the best teacher in Ontario, which maybe was arguable, but I was recognized at that level. I wrote textbooks. I wrote a civics textbook, and just had a real passion for helping kids, which has turned out to be neat crossover to real estate. I joke now with my clients that I used to help people with the most important thing, which was their kids as a guidance counselor. And now I help them with the second most important thing, which is, their real estate decisions.
I won't get into that. What I think it was like one you can argue is both are valuable.
Yes.
One is more rare than the other.
This is true. This is
As in
true.
the availability of getting.
Yes. Well, listen, I certainly there's maybe a big gap between those two, but I think the crossover just comes from the helping, the guiding, the teaching, the learning. Like those are the parts that I've really truly enjoyed. Like I really, really enjoyed helping people, and that was the part of teaching that I think has crossed over into real estate. And some of my clients would probably call me still a teacher because I enjoy finding out where people are on that spectrum of whether it's investing or shopping for a home or selling a home, and then helping them through to a successful end.
Right. I'm like the flip side. I started as an investor, and I enjoy teaching, but I was never a teacher.
I think you're a great teacher, and I don't think you need qualifications to become a teacher. And I think that's one of the challenges. The education system really confuses us. We're supposed to do this, then this, then this. But I think, we're moving into a world where, university isn't a prerequisite for success by any means whatsoever. But I think that myth continues. And I was a guidance counselor, so I was helping students and families decide what they were doing after high school. And so, to me, it was less of a straight line from A to B and more of a zigzag. But parents don't necessarily like to hear that. I actually created a program that was called Entrepreneurship in Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Math. And it was a program designed for kids who wanted to be a doctor, wanted to go into computer science or engineering. All those careers are the ones that every parent wants their student to go into. We tried to marry it with entrepreneurship because there's all these soft skills that kids aren't necessarily picking up through just their academic studies.
Right. Wow, we could talk for a while.
I love this stuff. I love it.
I didn't know that you were a guidance counselor, so I have lots of questions around that. But we have a lot of things to cover here. I'm not even sure where to go next. Actually, no. I have a question. Just to clarify, show us cultures about real estate investing. I think part of the investment decisions have to come from like people's incomes, for example. So can you give some transparency? For example, what does a 17-year teacher, what do they make in salary, and what's their pension? What does it pay? And what's a principal? What does a principal get paid? Because like to your point, like principals are responsible for a lot.
They really and truly are.
They
manage people of budgets of, our local school board has a $500 million budget. Like, can you imagine that? We have educators controlling that kind of money. Like it's pretty mind-boggling, I think so. It's almost like we need business people, almost, I'm talking maybe out of turn here, but it's almost like we need people with a business background to be running, budgets of that size.
But their clientele is very passionate both teachers and parents.
Yeah, very much
probably not easy audience.
No, for sure. There's lots of stakeholders. And so again, I think the crossover from teaching to real estate is there's so much dialogue that goes on. There's so much problem solving and troubleshooting in schools. And it really comes down to relationships. I always had such good relationships with families and parents and took the time to talk things through because there can be a lot of frustration when it comes time to your kid. And so to your question, the golden handcuffs is the golden handcuffs for a reason. It's, across policing and firefighting and nursing and teaching, as a tenured teacher, not a tenured teacher, but at the top level of the pay scale, you're making over $100,000 a year, 102, 105, sort of can depend. And of course you've got your time off. So you've got a shorter, work year than maybe a typical employee. And then you've got that pension that's being accumulated for you over time as well. So all of those things are tremendous benefits. Like what fortunate people are who go into that teaching profession. You get a rewarding career and you get rewarded for it. Here's what's interesting though. I don't know too many teachers that live all that high on the hog. And a lot of that's probably a lifestyle choice. But similarly in retirement, you have a defined benefit pension plan, which is amazing because most people don't. But I know a lot of retired teachers who are incredibly frugal. And again, maybe it's a lifestyle decision, but that's part of what led me to investing. My investment partner is also a full-time teacher as well. And we wanted to enhance our retirement. We wanted to leave some generational wealth for our kids. And we just really wanted to learn about something that was fun, enjoyable, and for us kind of became a side hustle that started as a side hustle and eventually just grew to a point where I couldn't ignore the economics of real estate, as compared to that teaching job, which was terrific. But real estate has just blown up for me in such an amazing and incredible way that I'm so grateful for, and that it's just become so lucrative and also so rewarding.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing. I've Googled, the reason I've Googled it, I've Googled what is a teacher's pensions worth? Because what I was trying to draw for like my listeners and my clients is trying to have like a kind of like a baseline, what kind of nest egg folks should have for retirement purposes. I've Googled, and the Google results a little bit fuzzy, but I think a teacher's pension would be worth somewhere between $1.5 to $2 million. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, it's annually you're looking at low 60s to mid 60s. Of course, that's fully guaranteed. Here's what's interesting about it. The teacher's pension plan. You could log on any teacher today, and you could look at exactly what your pension will be but more importantly, exactly when you're going to retire. So my retirement date was supposed to be November 1st, 2035. Now you'd think that'd be motivating for people, but in fact, it's a bit of a mind trap because the countdown to retirement begins almost as soon as you see that number. And I think psychologically
That's
that
tough.
messes with you a little bit. Like
So
I'm telling
far
you,
out.
you ask any teacher, experiment with this, ask any teacher what their retirement date is, they will be able to tell you precisely. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. Like I'm someone who really enjoys my work and I saw myself working well past retirement. Like that would have been, I would have been 56 in November of 2035. I always saw myself working well past retirement. And that's one of the attractions of real estate, with real estate, like it's one of those professions you die at your desk type of thing. You don't ever have to stop. And that was actually an appeal to me rather than having a set retirement date.
So Matt, so thank you for sharing. So my baseline, my challenge to all investors would be then to match something similar to like a teacher or a firefighter's pension to try to try to earn something around $65,000 per year then per person per husband, wife, whatever it is. I think that'd be a good place to start in terms of a target. Now, before we start recording, I gave you that challenge because it's a common goal that people approach me with. Not novice investors is they'll say to me, my objective is to. They usually don't say the number. They're usually saying their objective is to usually retire their spouse and then retire themselves. Sometimes the opposite, but usually it's retire their spouse is almost the number one goal of anyone I've spoken to, both women and men, especially
good
men.
Good people.
Very
you know what? I
kind of them.
share the same goal. Yeah, very kind.
Very
Absolutely. I love
kind
that
that
quality
they're
of
thinking
life
about their
conversation.
partner. Yeah, quality of life. But it's not just about their partner's quality of life. It's about they're thinking about their kids. They would like someone to be able to spend more time with the kids. Something that's been lost since we've left the gold standard, but that's another conversation. So very often novices will ask me tell me my goal is to make 10,000. They don't usually say it, but like I said, if they're looking to retire their spouse and they're trying, for example, and they're trying to mimic a teacher's pension, 65,000 is their pay in retirement, right? So basically, it's 5,000 per person. Right. Hence, I think that's where they got the goal of 10,000 per month in cash flow. So, how would you go about it?
I think it's such an interesting question because I think there's one of the fascinating things to me about real estate investing is there's just so many different strategies. Like, for example, I hate flips. I have a flip closing today that I didn't want to do, but I did anyways. And that's maybe another story. I just got too good of a deal on this property. And then it needed too much work. Of course, 3 months turned into 6 months, cost overruns, you're chasing contractors. Now I've done a lot of flips and I'll chat a little bit more about my wife and I's experience in flips of for never homes, maybe a little bit later in the conversation, but people like flips because they're big chunks of cash. So my point here is I think it's a matter of deciding what your intentions are, maybe what your why is. Like I love how Don Campbell calls it your personal beliefs. So what is your goal? What is your why? What is your long-term why? And then maybe experimenting with some different investment strategies to figure out which one works for you. So for me personally, I know I don't like flips, capital intensive, too many variables I can't control, and I don't like them. I don't think they're what I want. So for us, we buy multifamily, buy and hold long-term so that we can take advantage of those 3 silver bullets of investing. You've got your cash flow, of course, but here in Windsor, Essex, you've also got appreciation. Now in Windsor, in the GTA, it's almost all appreciation. It's impossible to cash flow. And then of course you've got mortgage pay down as well. So I recognize those 3 things at work. And I remember going to my very first real estate investing workshop and hearing those 3 things. And it was just like a light bulb, that went off. Like you can make money 3 different ways in real estate. To me, that was so fascinating and amazing. I also own an Airbnb, which was previously a personal home, but it's not even so much about the cash flow with the Airbnb. Airbnbs allow you to buy nicer properties and keep them. Like my typical multifamily rentals, I would never live in one. I'm actually living in my own Airbnb right now while I wait my next home that I've purchased. So I think for me, I would direct the question more to what is your purpose? And I think that a lot of novice investors get trapped in trying to come up with these huge numbers and huge dreams. And and they actually then get stuck in that analysis paralysis and they don't start. So I try to start my investors who are new to the game, small with lots and lots of support so that they can then scale that up. Any investor is going to diversify. Like we've learned a ton from you through stock hacking, for example. We took multiple courses from you. That was really interesting to me. It wasn't the stock market had really intimidated me prior to that. And listen, it still does. Some of those advanced courses were just over my head. My partner, Kyle, he loved that and ate it up. But for me, I really had to stay at that novice level. So getting into those equities and like I sold some options on Carnival back in the pandemic. So it was fun to be on a boat saying, yeah, I made some money off these guys. Now I'm giving them some money.
Yeah. Maybe we can write this off
Likewise,
because I'm
that's
inspecting
right.
my
That's
investment.
right. Well, and I did go with my investment partner. Like I did go with my investment partner. Note that. And
Yeah.
then
You're working
also
on location. Yep.
working on location. Exactly. We did talk a lot of business, and then a whole life insurance. Well, not an investment. Again, Kyle and is well ahead of me in that regard. But I'm working my way towards my first whole life policy. So I think it's about diversifying, and I think one of the neat crossovers from teaching to real estate investing is just that learning. Like I stopped listening to the radio in the car. I only listen to podcasts. My family hates it. It's so boring for them, but I only want to learn. I love to listen to audiobooks, podcasts, because there's such an array of expertise out there, and it's literally at your fingertips if you're willing to access it. So for me, I don't think I've necessarily nailed exactly what it looks like. My active income has now become as a real estate agent, but that side hustle income, that extra income from real estate investing, that will, of course, do those things that we wanted to do. It's going to make a really sweet retirement for us. It's going to create some generational wealth we'll be able to share with our children, similar to what you and Cherry are doing for yours. And in the meantime, we're having a whole lot of fun learning about it. And more recently, doing some JVs, welcoming other people, into these opportunities that are, let's be honest, pretty intimidating to get started with for a lot of people.
But you did it.
Yes, and that's the advice. Get started. Get
started. And to clarify, you do have another career as well. Oh, we haven't really touched on that. So to go with the question, what keeps you busy? Because you became a realtor as well.
Yeah, I did. I initially got it. It was my New Year's goal, New Year's resolution of 2020. And of course, pandemic hit. We'd been buying investment properties. We've been doing this for about 7 years now. So we actually bought we just closed on a 9-plex, but prior to that, our last purchase was March of 2020, just before the pandemic. Get these numbers. We bought a 10-unit building, 6 residential, 4 commercial for $469,000. It was unheard of. So we'd been investing in real estate. I'd always, we had bought and sold some of our own homes, and my background with my wife is really interesting. My wife has, I guess we would call her a social media influencer. She's got almost 60,000 followers on Instagram, and her name's Leslie. Her handle is the Leslie Style. So she started sharing our renovations. We would take on these crazy, like absurd, just ridiculous renovations where we would transform these houses into what became literally magazine-worthy projects. Like she's been in House and Home or Better Homes and Gardens in the Toronto Star, like all over the place. And this originated from her just wanting to share the work that we were doing. And it blew up to the point where at one point we had a TV production crew come in from New York and film this whole pilot on, trying to pitch us to networks on being flippers, but we weren't flippers. We were both full-time teachers at that time. But to make a long story longer, real estate was just so ever present in our lives as an investor and in buying and selling on our own. Like we'd moved 6 times in 8 years at one point, my wife and I, that getting my license became a no-brainer. And then when I got my license, the success I found as a realtor, which certainly was due to the market, but I think just also due to these great crossover skills I had as an educator, just made real estate something that I couldn't not do full time. I was invited by a very well-known realtor locally named Doris Lapico to become her partner. She had sold one of her houses. She called me up and said, Matt, I need a partner and it's going to be you. And I said, oh, that's funny, Doris. I'm just getting started. She said, you have all the qualities that I don't have. We're going to make a perfect match. And the rest is history. Last year, we were the top team in our brokerage, 11 out of 12 months. We sold almost $60 million in real estate. We've now built out a small team, but we have continued to just grow and to grow our brand. And we're having so much fun helping people and of course, selling buckets and buckets of real estate here.
Amazing. So you're doing really well.
We've been incredibly blessed, and I think we work hard, but we have so much fun doing it, that's the neat thing about real estate, maybe as compared to teaching. I don't have any bosses. I don't have anyone directing me what to do. Education is very top down. The ideas come from the top. With real estate, it is all it's make it or break it. I've hired an amazing coach. We have the same coach, Marianne Gillespie, who's incredible, who's a great driver for me, but it's all self-motivation. And with real estate, what fascinates me is you can literally work on self-improvement, which I love. I'm a big self-improvement junkie. So becoming the best version of yourself and also creating a great business. And I think those two things are what really drive me, that business end and that self-improvement end.
So something key that stands out about your story that's unique in terms of the show is that you joined a team. What I often find is a lot of folks getting into some sort of professional real estate, anything, like say, for example, realtor or mortgage agent, they're usually trying to do it on their own, like from the ground up, versus you joined a successful team, already successful agent broker. What's the experience been like?
I had a
Is it
few.
something you do over again? I'm guessing you would.
Yeah. I'm going to say that the biggest mistake that new real estate agents make is that they see real estate as a lifestyle rather than as a business. Real estate is a business. People want to focus on the pretty, on the marketing end of things. And real estate really comes down to a set of very repeatable behaviors that you need to learn and execute before you ever almost have to get into the marketing and that sort of maybe lifestyle end of things. So I actually started with a team very briefly when I started real estate, and I was blown away by their training, by their processes, by just how well organized they were. And I actually left that team because they were actually located in Hamilton and expanding down here to Windsor, and it just didn't work as a new agent. I needed more support than that. I then went as a solo agent and was able to partner up with Doris to then create a team. So my advantage was in joining someone at her level, 25 years of experience, top 5, top 3 agents in the city, great reputation. I was able to get that endorsement from her, which in the eyes of then, the real estate public at large, I had legitimacy because I had that great endorsement. So from a team perspective, I think that's huge. And I think that teams can bring tremendous value in terms of training, support. They can help really flatten that learning curve that when you first get into real estate, you get your license and then you say, like, now what? How do I sell houses? How do I find clients? How do I make money? Once I find clients, how do I convert those clients? It can be pretty intimidating. And I think that's generally misunderstood, probably from the propensity of, real estate shows and that sort of stuff that really depict that lifestyle part, but almost really leave out the business part of real estate.
Right. And just to add on the lifestyle part, with affordability the way it is, like for example, when I started in real estate, it was I operated mainly in Hamilton, so it was rare to see a Toronto agent showing property, leaving business cards in a Hamilton listing. Fast forward to today, so that was 2010, right? Fast forward to today, all the time, I see business cards from like Richmond Hill. So agents that drove over an hour to show a listing in Hamilton.
Wow.
So the lifestyle is very different. And even early days when I started, divorce rate was very high among realtors. And the pressures are only getting worse.
Well, look, you were sitting in your car last night on your birthday, writing a counter offer in the front seat with your laptop, which I have done before. Yeah. But there's a lot of creep of real estate into your life where it's like,
absolutely.
On my kids' birthdays, I've been trying to work on deals on the side. Like real estate just seeps into all of your life and you have to be very deliberate. And I'm not good at this. Like I often work 7 days a week. I am trying to work 6 days a week, but as you know, it's just tough to do. And so you have to be very, very deliberate. And that's where the coach comes in. You need that outside voice to like give you a pull or a tug or a push, when you need it. And I see agents driving down to Windsor from Toronto still. And I'm saying, we do a ton of referral work down here. Let us take care of your clients at a high level. Let us get you paid through that referral fee. Like what are you doing? This is a crazy waste of your time.
Truth about real estate, though, I think we added over 12,000 realtors just last year in 2022 alone. And even before that, truth about real estate investing, statistically so over 50% of Toronto agents do 0 to 1 deals per year. Right. So a lot of people are not making enough to make a living. Right?
You're right. And I think there's been a lot of new realtors and that's not a bad thing. I think that can make us more competitive, but let's be honest, most of those realtors are not going to be successful. I had a veteran agent call me recently an assassin. He said, "You're well trained, you know what you're doing, you're incredibly hungry." He's like, "I worry about the agents on my team, compared to you, because you just have this drive, but you also are learning this skill set." And then, so I said, real estate assassin. I kind of like the sounds of that.
I was actually talking to another team leader who's feeling the pressure to grow his team. And I said to him, it is really difficult to find someone with the drive, the IQ, the high IQ,
And
and
EQ. And EQ.
EQ. Oh yeah, I
so
said
important in
interpersonal
real
skills
estate.
are incredibly important
Yeah.
to be a successful realtor, and then know enough about home construction
Yeah, that's
in
so
order to
true. That
properly
is so
represent your
true.
client. And we're not even talking about investor agent yet,
Right, right.
right? Because add to that, an investor agent needs to understand financial analysis, right?
Yes.
And the business of operating a real estate investment property, like I don't need to tell you, but this is for the listeners' benefit, especially anyone who's new. An investment property is a business, right? So
Very
to
much
be
so.
a
Very
to be
much
a
so.
specific to be an investor agent, you need to know a lot. And
But
honestly,
how
I've
can
seen
you
many
sell an
people fail it.
investment if you don't own any? How can you call yourself an investor agent if you don't own any investments or never have? Like, you
They took a
theoretically
course.
understand investments? Yeah, exactly.
They're paying 50K for
Exactly. So
courses. Done.
that's right. So true. So true.
Yeah. It's actually, we're laughing, but it's true. People do it. Versus in my experience, like I belong to entrepreneurs organization. When we speak to one another, we're not allowed to give you, when we're speaking to other members, we're not allowed to give each other advice, right? It's the way,
Interesting.
it's our training. Instead of giving people advice, we share with them our experience, and it has to be our experience, right? So for
Love
these
that. I
novices
love
who
that.
took a $50,000 course, $30,000 course, whatever, how do they speak to their experience of evicting a tenant, of screening a tenant, of showing properties to a tenant, of managing contractors, managing a renovation project, of structuring a deal and presenting it to your bank, right? For both the getting the mortgage and also for the exit, the refi, whatever it is, right? These are not skills that grow on trees.
Yeah. And you've spoken so much about these, I don't know, what do we call them? Charlatans, who have made real
Yeah.
estate investing sound so sexy. And I think a lot of speculators are probably feeling the crunch right now. So for me, it
Yeah,
goes back to
you
that
saw it a lot.
education,
You saw a
Yeah,
lot
we
of it
saw it a
personally,
lot.
right on the streets,
In
right?
fact, listen, all of that I would call speculative money. Like, I would get dozens of calls a weekend from Toronto agents who were driving down totally unprepared. They didn't get themselves access to our local lock boxes, so
Yeah.
freaking out they couldn't
Oh,
get into
absolutely.
properties. But with clients, it was caravans of people coming down. They have all but disappeared, which makes Windsor, Essex such an interesting investment landscape right now,
Mhm.
because we're seeing, like, last month, there were more duplexes sold than any month dating back to last May. So we're seeing some of the investment money come back in, but that outside money, which really was part of that
Right.
push of average home prices up so high in Windsor, Essex, it's all but gone in terms of my at least anecdotal experience recently.
Right. So what's duplex go for now in Windsor?
Well, you can
Sorry.
get it.
Share what it was at the peak, and then what's the comparable going for today?
Yeah.
And
So, I mean, listen, I just sold a beautiful duplex in a plus neighborhood for, $611,000, which was the most expensive duplex sold this year in Windsor, Essex, $611,000. So you can get yourself a duplex for, mid fours would be a solid duplex for sure. We just picked up a really nice 9-unit building for a shade under 1.5. So, that was on the higher end of where we'd like to spend, but it was also completely turnkey, the nicest property we've yet purchased. And for Kyle and I, we really started to think about, a priced versus cost. So we would always get the cheapest, just lowest price properties, and then it would cost us a lot of money. We'd have to dump all this cash into improving them.
right.
That 10-unit, $469,000 building. Well, here we are 3 years later, still dumping money into it. So, in terms of that quality of life or that maturity as an investor, we're willing to pay a little bit more, to get better properties. And in this case, seller held 70% of the mortgage at 3% interest only for 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
which made it a more attractive purchase as well.
Mm-hmm.
But a few years ago, Kyle and I wouldn't have been mature enough as investors to get why that was such a good buy.
Right. And then like versus like Grant Cardone buys really nice stuff, like
Yes,
white picket
yes.
fence,
And
stuff that's
Airbnbs can
already.
be like that. Like people are buying really expensive houses at Airbnbs. Again, I own one, but I only own an Airbnb. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, I could keep a house that I bought for $300,000 in 2017, and last year the appraisal's gone down, I'm sure, but was appraised for $950,000. So 2017 to 2022, 5 years, tripled in value. So it's allowed me to keep a nicer property than any of my rentals. But there's also a nice joy factor in the Airbnb. Like you're welcoming people to your town. I live in this amazing town. I call it Kingsville Bubble. It's like nothing ever goes wrong here in Kingsville. It's just a magical place on Lake Erie. And it's really fun to help welcome people. And so to your point about buying really nice properties, I think we see a lot of that in the Airbnb realm. Although I'm not always sure that the promise of major returns on Airbnbs are necessarily there, just because you've got higher operating costs and generally you're buying more expensive houses.
Are you managing your own Airbnb? Like who's dealing with the day to day on that?
So the nice thing about Airbnb is it's all through an app predominantly. And of course, I've set up all these systems. So that works really well. We've got an AI pricing tool we use. So that the pricing is taken care of. And then we have cleaners. And so the cleaners are terrific and they would manage for us. But I've got to be honest, I love being that front facing customer service point of contact for the clients because I can ensure the highest level of service. I think a lot of Airbnb managers, when they manage 10, 12, 30 properties, you just can't expect them to deliver that level of service to your own guests. And so I call them clients, but guests. And so I've continued to do that. It doesn't make any economic sense for me to do it. And in fact, when we're really busy, which is summertime, there's moments we have a pool at the property, which is a big draw, but also the bane of my existence in the summer because it requires a lot of maintenance. So I need to take what my advice would be to my own Airbnb client and say, leverage some of this stuff out. Your time is too valuable to be like cleaning the pool or, responding to people in the
Mm-hmm.
Airbnb chat. But that's, although it doesn't necessarily make logical sense, it's what I've decided to do for now, anyways.
Is their insurance pretty steep? Like you have a pool. Like for
Yeah.
example,
So
like
a pool,
for
it's a historically designated home as well. So the replacement value is like unbelievable, like through the roof. So yes, insurance is definitely high.
like
Now I'm going to, speaking of best uses of property, I'm actually going to fill the pool this year. Maybe shouldn't tell my future Airbnb guests because I'm severing 60 feet off the back of this property in order to, do something there, some purpose-built rentals, build a semi. My real estate partner, her family owns a custom construction company. So we're talking about that. So the same Airbnb property that's tripled in value, I'm now going to sever off 60 by 120 and do something with that. It's still a little bit up in the air as to what that looks like. So the pool is going to be filled in, which will hurt our business, but will improve my own quality of life dramatically and become such a value add to this property for having been able to sever that off and do something with it.
it's a big property.
It's a big
And I
property. You
guess
know
you're
what?
never
That's
moving
that's a
back.
Yeah, no, I'm never moving back. Although I am living here now. It's a corner lot. It's right in the heart of downtown. I joke with guests that like Kingsville is really renowned for its restaurant. So I say you can walk to dinner and stumble home. You never have to get in a car, and that's part of the draw of our property. It's beautiful, historical. We do a lot of weddings here. Brides take their pictures. Again, it's been all over magazines, and my wife's Instagram feed gets tons and tons of traffic. So people, it's a draw for all those reasons, but it's such a deep lot. It's a 220 feet deep, 120 feet wide in the middle of this downtown of this small town that extra property. We really I never even go back there except to cut the lawn. Although I don't even cut my own lawn anymore. I've also leveraged that out. So it was sitting there. I said, I've got to do this. I've got to sever it. I've got to, my real estate wheels turned and I said, there's a big chunk of property waiting for something great to be done with it. Just a matter of figuring out exactly what that's going to look like.
It's a big lot layout. 60 by 120, you said?
Yeah, 60 by
Wow.
120.
So
So
the
the
original
recent legislative changes will help, I think, in terms of what we end up putting there. I'm debating, like, do we build something to sell it, or do we build some, custom, or not some custom, but some purpose-built rentals? Got to explore that a little bit more before we make a decision.
Now I want to roll into actually no before I want to keep on actually on the subject. You mentioned speculators and where the market's at. Like I think most people who monitor like the preferred investment areas, like a Welland, like an Oshawa, like a Hamilton, like a Windsor, like they rose like crazy, and
Mm-hmm.
and peaked in February 20. It's only been it hasn't even been that long. It peaked
It
in
hasn't been that long.
February
It's
2022.
crazy to
I
think
know
that.
it's fun.
Yeah.
It's funny because I have interest rate conversations with people every day. Like, when's it gonna cut? When's the cut coming? When's the cut coming? Right? Like, dude, it's been 13 months since we had our first raise.
13 months.
It's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
it's been a month since we paused rates, rate increases. It hasn't been that long. Like people are like every day, like when's rates
Every
cutting? When's
day.
rates cutting? But sorry, my point was that the market's gone up and down a lot. Like you mentioned, like did you see your typical duplex? It was like in the 400s.
Yeah,
Today.
so we got today you could get a typical duplex in the 400s. Like when we look at average price points from I look from sort of where we were pre-pandemic, and of course we had that big climb from March of 2020. Like we essentially almost doubled average home prices in Windsor Essex, up to that peak, and we're down about 27%. If we look at March, I just took a quick peek at March numbers this morning. So we're down about 27% from peak, but I think there's still such value here. Like I had clients in town the last 2 days who spent most of their professional life in Oakville, Burlington, and they just said, Matt, this place is a secret. Like, first of all, let's not tell anyone. And everyone I help move here says the same thing.
We're gonna delete this
because
episode.
you've got listen, the primary reason people move here is affordability. Like you're able to sell in areas like that, move down here and put a ton of dough in your pocket. So affordability is number one. And I said to them, I toured them around the area. We went for a great lunch, showed them the wineries, the beaches, the lakefront, all the pretty little shops and microbreweries that we have here. And I said, listen, we could make you fall in love with this place, but I recognize the number one reason you're moving here is because, you want to be mortgage free, debt free, move here. But some of the side benefits are just quality of life. Anyone who comes here from the GTA says the same thing. I get back so much of my day and my week because I'm not stuck in traffic. Go from the south shore of Essex County to the north shore is about 35 minutes. That's the longest drive you're going to have in Windsor, Essex, really.
Right.
So that quality of life is
35
amazing.
minutes, small town. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got an internet, like we flew out of Detroit, which was an hour from my door to the Detroit International Airport. You've got all the major league sports teams there, great concerts, amazing culture, food. And then they call this region the Sun County. So it's called that because we are remarkably warmer than the rest of Ontario. Even London, a few hours down the road, you get absolutely demolished in winter. And so there's a quality of life aspect to coming here that people find, but again, largely in affordability. These clients from out of town were blown away by what they could get here, and they were looking in the higher end. They were looking over $1 million, and we sell a lot of homes in $1 million. We do a lot of that luxury real estate, $1 million and up, but they said compared to what we would get back home, it's inconceivable. They said people would just be blown away. So let's try to keep that as a secret the best we can.
Oh, how is the over $1 million? How is like the million and over market? Has it come back?
It's been encouraging.
Just to give some context for the listener, back in 2017, anything that was high end was hit the most, as in it fell the most. Like it fell from the peak. High end. Now high end's different for every market, right? So for example, high end in Oakville in 2017 was around 1.8. Right,
1.8. Okay,
and then that probably dropped around 30% from the peak of 2017, but it recovered probably by 2019. So it took about 2 years to recover. So what high end is different for every neighborhood. For example, I've shared before on the show, like my cousin lives Yonge Street, south of 401. So that neighborhood, for example, high end starts at 3 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big numbers.
That's what's high end. He tells me anything between 2 and 3 million, it flies. It gets listed.
Can you imagine?
Like 4 or 5 offers sold in 48 hours. Usually in competition. So that's more like that's like the active area, and then anything under 2 will fly because that's all starter market for them. I'm talking about houses, of course. So so million exactly is probably quite high for Windsor.
It is, yeah. Average home prices, mid fives, the busiest segment of the market for the last number of months for sure is kind of that low 4s to mid 5s. And we certainly operate there, but we really do a lot in the higher end. And I think there's an interesting crossover between luxury and investing, because of course, lots of wealthy people have gotten wealthy because they've invested in real estate. So, we help them with the purchase and sale of their homes, and we also help them invest in real estate. So I walked off the plane from the cruise ship last Sunday night and into multiple offers on $1 million listing I had. So we closed that, and while I was away, completed a deal for a $2 million property. So it's nice to see some of the higher end things moving. Even my own personal property, we sold it last July, listed at $2.1 million at a beautiful lake house, one of our massive renovations. Sold it same day, under asking, but sold it the same day we listed it. And for the region, that would have been a very expensive property to see something listed over two. And our team, I personally sold 3 of the 4 most expensive properties in along the lake where I live on the south shore of Essex County last year. All almost 1.8, 1.975, and then 2.1. So those would certainly be considered here, that kind of ultra luxury end. We've seen a lot more $1 million houses pop up, but by and large, I think those were out of town buyers coming here saying $1 million is nothing. I just sold for 2.5 in Burlington. Yeah. So we're seeing that average price point push up. I think much to the, it's a challenge for locals who maybe haven't necessarily had a house to sell elsewhere and come here with all that equity for themselves.
And that's the sad thing about this world, is that everyone's pushing other people out.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then I also think,
it's like where do they go?
Like do something about it though, in the sense that, I'm not one to, like, in my own mind, like stay a victim for very long, and not to say, like, not to call housing affordability, say, victims or victimless, but what can we do? Is it a side hustle? Is it another opportunity? Not everyone has the ability to do that. But I just believe in being so resourceful and working so hard to do what you need to do. So, I think we all have origin stories of financial challenges as kids, or from our parents, or whatever that might look like, or even from ourselves. And I love stories of people overcoming that, no matter what their background, to become something maybe greater than they could have ever imagined. So not to be dismissive of that, but to just say, like, instead of, focusing on the complaining part of it and the lamenting of forces that we really can't control, these are global economic forces. What can we do to improve our own personal situation and that of our family and community?
Yeah, that's why I bought houses for my kids, because the situation's so bad.
Bang, there you go. Yes, and you've spoken so eloquent. That's been inspiring. Like, so much of what I learned in my early days of real estate investing was from listening to podcasts like yours. Like, I think I've listened to every episode of your podcast. Some of the other great ones out there as well. Like, you can learn from someone like you who was doing it before we were doing it, and that was a big message that you shared often about having houses for your kids.
Yeah, my RESP, real estate savings plan. For my kids.
I love it. Kids. I think it's brilliant. And for our kids to be able to afford houses in the future, who knows what that's going to look like? It's going to be absolutely bonkers to think what a single family home is going for in 15 years, when my kids are ready to maybe get into the housing market.
And just a point of clarification for the listener, like, I bought these houses so at a minimum as a hedge on the real estate market, should the market get away, because I thought that was what was going to happen. So that way, my kids have a foot in the market already, so that they can hopefully afford a home by the time they're old enough to own a home. Yeah. Okay. So, Matt, can you put on your guidance counselor hat on?
Sure. Okay.
I'm sure. As a continuation of what we were just talking about, people who haven't gotten into the market yet, either for their home or their first income property, put your guidance counselor hat on. What should they do?
If they haven't got a home or haven't gotten into the market, we're talking more from an investing standpoint.
Almost all of it. So, for example, if I'm talking to a high schooler who's lost, this is just me. I'm not a guidance counselor. I'm not professionally trained at all, right? If someone feels lost, I encourage a lot of people to learn how to use the tools, right? Yeah. Because I've met too many people who are good on the tools who become successful, including a good friend of mine who's a lawyer by trade, who's honestly made more money for him and his family by working on developments, including being on the tools.
I'm not surprised. Right. We talked about the stigma around, the trades, and that everyone thinks they have to go to university in order to be successful. And, like, I think one of the chronic misunderstandings societally, this isn't just in school, it's just about, like, kids want to focus on being rich, getting money. And so they think there's certain pathways to that. And I think, as parents, we don't necessarily focus on the getting rich part, but we want our kids to be nurses and doctors and computer scientists and engineers, because in our mind, maybe there's some status associated with that, or that's what our definition of success looks like. And I think we almost need to change the way we define what rich looks like. It's really about living your best, most authentic life, whatever that looks like, whatever that looks like. It's all about choices. If you want to buy the Lamborghini and that's your goal, then buy the Lamborghini. But if you're okay with, the Honda Civic and that's your best life because you're using that money elsewhere, then do that. So I think that's part of what we're not teaching kids about. I think that.
Oh, but I'll add to that. I think kids should understand who the Millionaire Next Door is.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a terrific book. The Millionaire Next Door. I love that book.
If they drive a luxury car, it's likely used.
Yeah, right.
They do. And it's a good chance it's already paid off. Right? Millionaire Next Door does not have a Lamborghini. Right? And I've mentioned it before on the show, like among my clients are generally the millionaire next door. They're very successful. They've earned over $1 million in real estate. And generally, they do not drive a luxury vehicle. And if they do, it's paid off and they bought it secondhand.
Yeah, this is not about, I think, becoming wealthy is not about the status whatsoever. In fact, like to me, the pursuit of wealth, I've almost like wanted to gamify it. So it's almost fun. Like, of course, listen, everyone needs to have their basic needs met. That is that goes without saying, but I'll say it, if you don't have food, shelter, those sorts of things like that, basic economic security, I get it. Once you've achieved that, and that's what teaching allowed me to do, like to feel safe, to feel as though I was going to always have an income. Growing up, my dad was in retail, really tough sector, at points made a lot of money and at points lost his job. That was tough for our family. So teaching was that safety net. But above and beyond that, that's where the fun comes in. Like, how can I make money? We learned about options trading. We dove into that. That was really interesting. Now we're learning about whole life. Different facets of real estate investing. We tried flips. Some of them went terribly. We learned from it. We moved forward. So I think it's like, there's been moments in life where I've reflected too much on failures or things didn't work well, or, falling out with, people in life. But I think it's almost like we overthink it. That's maybe like our ego. It's almost like we delve too deep into that and trying to extrapolate meaning from it. And it should really just be like taking it as the learning and almost seeking curiosity and saying like, that didn't work, and I'm going to try this next. And that's where the fun of this comes, because real estate investing is really quite boring. But I think having like a partner to do it with, like Kyle, my partner, we talk every single day. We talked all throughout the cruise. It's so much fun to do it together, but you have to find those right people, those like-minded people.
So that actually brings up a good story, not a good story, a really good lesson, because in the background, quietly, a lot of these companies, a lot of these gurus or coaching or weekend program graduates, or they paid whatever in education. A lot of these folks are failing, when I mean failing, like they didn't just lose money, they lost their shirts. Like some of these folks are going bankrupt, and for example, one company that I studied, it was just a bad partnership, as in. And I mentioned it during like the Ben Bergen episode. For example, if a successful, like all business is hard. All business is hard. Like Apple nearly failed many times. Tesla, SpaceX nearly failed many times. But one lesson I refer back to often for Apple, for example, is you had Steve Jobs and you had Steve Wozniak. Their skill sets couldn't have been more complementary. Right, there was almost no overlap.
Right, the integrator and the visionary, the rocket fuel concept.
Right, and Wozniak was just more than the integrator. He could do everything. In terms of integration, in terms of like he built their first computers. Right, he had all the early engineering expertise that they needed to at least create the prototype. Jobs, I don't know how many years it would take him to be able to do that himself. But Jobs could sell. Right, Jobs could market. He could sell a vision. He could recruit people, right? Like those skills are extremely complementary. So, and in conversation with Kyle, like it seems like it's the same way with yourself and your investment partner.
Yeah, very much so. I think you need to have complementary skill sets, and I think those two roles are integral. It's the same with Doris and I in real estate. We have really complementary skills, and we recognize that. So the value proposition for Doris and I in our real estate team, and Kyle and I in our real estate investing, is it's something that gives us just confidence. We understand it. There's never a gripe. There's never a wonder if it's worth it or not. It's just such a beautiful marriage of differences. And to relate back to your question about kids and how to guide them, I think those are the types of things that we don't really recognize or realize. And we talked about EQ before, like how do you get along with others? We were all selfish. I see it in my young kids who are still learning this and learning how to get along with others in elementary school at those young ages. And then the other thing is just like to become mentally strong in our mindset. Like it amazes me as an adult, I'm 44 years old, how much effort it takes to maintain our mental health, physical and mental health. And I think that's a message lost on or not taught explicitly when we're younger either. Like, I just feel like I'm surrounded kind of constantly by people who are in crisis or having a challenge in life that's really taking a toll on them, or, have succumbed to some sort of an addiction, or, my own brother took his life during the pandemic in 2021. And
I'm so sorry.
It was, I think, in part to do with his mindset that eroded, pandemic related, some other challenges with addictions. And I think that ultimately maybe some mental illness, but, coming out of that, my approach to grieving was to learn how to grieve. And it's something that I worked through, but in reflecting on his passing, and he was a carpenter, incredibly talented carpenter, and reflecting on his passing, it's just that my takeaway was we need to maintain our physical and mental health above all things. We need to become mentally resilient. We need to have outlets for when we are feeling stressed or under pressure. And we're all a work in progress. I'm far from being perfect, but through having that, just like in real estate coaching, I got a grief coach or a grief counselor, and she was just really able to help with a perspective that allowed me to actually move through that grief and not cling to it, not hold on to it, so that it actually curtails, your life. So kind of gone off on a tangent here, but I just think so many real estate investors, successful real estate investors, and I think I see this in you, we don't know each other well, but you seem to have amazing resilience, a great support network, and a lot of habits you've put in place to keep you, mentally and physically healthy. And I think that's so integral to success in life, whatever your pathway is.
Thanks for the compliment. And it's a good point to bring up. Resilience is incredibly important to be any successful investor. To get ahead and to be successful in anything in life is how much shit can you deal with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We deal with shit. Like, we got tenants, we got renovation projects, we got budgets that are being broken, and timelines that are going, that you mentioned yours went double from planned 3 months to went to 6 months. Like, these are difficult and stressful.
And when we save our kids from experiencing any stress or having to navigate through challenges, when we save them from that, when we come in and rescue them, I think is our natural instinct as a parent, as I saw it at school a lot, you're actually hurting them, because the safe time to learn about all that is while you're in school. My advice for kids was like, take opportunities, try different things. It doesn't matter if you're the worst person on the team or that club, like just gather experiences. That's what my advice would be.
Mm-hmm.
But as kids, like, our confidence is so fragile. We all just want to cling to whatever niche we're a part of or whatever one good thing we've been told we're good at. And I think we just need to have far more range. This whole culture, my kids are dancers, they're 8 and 10. They dance 6 days a week. I'm like, we don't have time for Girl Guides. I'd love that. I'd love to do hockey or soccer. And so I think as parents, helping our kids gather experiences is integral to making them have that resilience you talk about when we're older.
My kids are in competitive public speaking.
I love that.
And their classmates, when we see them in competition, they are so polished. And versus my kids are like usually the bottom quartile, because honestly, Cherry and I are really busy, and we're not going to handhold them through this, so they get their butts kicked. But I think also it is that other parents are doing a lot of the work for the kids. And coaching the crap out of them, right? Like, that is like their focus, is they want a winner competitive public speaker, versus for our Cherry and I, we just want our kids to be comfortable speaking in front of publicly. right? Our goals are very different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because Cherry made an observation at a certain age, I forget what she said, somewhere around like 13, 15, the quality of the talks just fell apart compared to the younger. Because there seems to be an age where the parents stop helping.
Stop helping. I would see like
so a
all the
12-year-old
schools I
would be able
taught
to be
at.
better than a 15-year-old.
Better than 15 I believe it. Like I taught at all three of my schools had specialized programs. My first school was a specialized arts program. My second school was an enriched math and science program. Like kids would come from China specifically to come to this school in Windsor. It was crazy. And my last school, I helped create this specialized program for kids who wanted to go into medicine, computer science, and engineering. What you would see though, is when kids got into those latter years of high school, the pressure just got to the point where they were just crumbling. Some of them, I saw a lot of really high-end kids get burnt out at 16, 17. And you're like, oh my God, your 20s is so much harder. Like what happens next? And so to your point, I think that, and listen, parenting is so hard. I am far from a great parent, and really very much figuring it out. But I think we have to let our kids, Doris, my real estate partner, says it all the time. Her kids are in their 20s. You have to let them struggle. You have to let them experience struggle. And I really reflected on that because my instinct as a parent is to swoop in and save, and that's actually maybe counterintuitive to what we, or counter to what we should be doing. Like let them struggle, let them learn, support them,
let them
lose.
But
let them lose. Yeah, like enough participation ribbons, right? I mean, they get lots and lots of encouragement. And I think feedback, as a teacher, feedback's really interesting. I don't think we do it really well. They talk about descriptive feedback. So instead of saying like, great job, like it's more like, I really liked how you structured this paragraph and that you made these, 3 great points over here. It's about really giving people descriptive feedback that they can use, because great job doesn't really help me, but we feel good for giving that, pat on the back type of thing. So I think feedback is so important in those points of maybe reflecting with your kids and having those conversations so that they're even learning from what they're going through and recognizing that learning. That's where that EQ, I think, is part of that growth that's so integral.
Matt, we're over time. Thanks for being so generous with your time. I'm pretty sure your hourly rate is very high.
I'll be sending an invoice after this.
I can't afford you.
Just send your referrals. Don't drive down here. But if you do, I'll give you a great tour of the region.
Matt, where can people connect with you? Where can people follow along?
Well, Kyle and I and another one of our partners, John, have started a podcast called Invested Teacher. So our audience is really aimed at, those that are maybe benefiting and doing well in life already, but want to go that next level and exploring investing from that standpoint. So the investedteacher.com and the Invested Teacher podcast, I think we're on episode 15 or 16 and having a ton of fun sharing that. My real estate team is called The Real Group. You can find us at therealgroup.ca. And my own personal Instagram is Matt Loves Real Estate. Would love to connect, love to talk about real estate, love to talk about learning, and always love to meet great people who are interested in the same things.
Fabulous, Matt. And then any final words you want to leave off with to the listener, our 17 listeners?
that number sounds like it hasn't really grown,
Here, actually, let me frame the question for you. If you could stand on stage at your old school in high school, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I think I would tell them that, as the author Marie Forleo says, everything is figure outable. Like we can figure this out always and forever. There's always a way forward. I think that I would, gosh, that's a really great question, Erwin. That's a really great question. I think, what would I say to those kids? I think I would tell them that we spend far too much time thinking about the future and the past, and that in that very moment, we can be in the present. And I think that that's important for all of us because we're full of hopes, ambitions, or maybe regrets. And I think that that's part of it. I think I would say that life is not a straight line. It's not A to B, that it's a squiggly line with lots and lots of learning in between those squiggles. And I think that when we reflect at the end of our lives, that each one of us would hope to have made a difference and to maybe have lived a path less traveled, or at least more exciting and more interesting. I'm really interested in retirement, and even, there's that great book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, and just like thinking about your life. I was a history teacher. So for me, history wasn't about names and dates. it was about stories, and it was about understanding themes, and it was about reflecting on what the past looked like and how that has, how that has changed or stayed the same. And I think that's just so fascinating. So our life is but a blip, in that vast timeline of history. And I think that we take it far too seriously. And I think that we could all live a little bit more creatively and adventurously.
That's pretty awesome. I will leave it there.
Thanks so much,
Matt.
Aaron.
Thanks so much for doing this. This was pretty awesome. Hopefully the listener enjoyed.
Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy that I personally use in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/YouTube to register for our next class. The link is also in the description as well. I publish at least 2 to 3 videos a week here, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. And if you're just starting out, feel free to ask questions and comment below, and I do the best to answer each of those comments and questions myself. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing from a professional investor, register for our next virtual class. That's at investortraining.ca/YouTube. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.